Allahu Akbar, Allah.
I always tell people that I was born in the ancient world. Educated in the old world and became an adult in the new world.
أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله.
I would like to tell my story in 3 acts.
أشهد أن لا إله.
Act 1, the ancient world, Cyprus, 1948 to 1953. Cyprus is a large island in the eastern part of the Mediterranean. Archaeological remains show that there was human activity as far back as the 10th millennium BC. Cyprus has been occupied by Greeks, Assyrians, Egyptians, and Persians. It was also part of the classical and Eastern Roman Empire. To this day, my cousin's dairy farm in Cyprus has part of a Roman aqueduct running through it. The Arab caliphates were there. The French Lusinian dynasty and the Venetians were also there. The Ottoman Turks were there for over 300 years. And from 1874, Cyprus was a British colony. My Turkish Cypriot heritage and my DNA is a testimony to that very long history of occupation. Cyprus gained its independence from Britain in 1960. My name is Ilkay Silk. I was born on the 8th of January, 1948. My parents were Sami and Shazieh Hassan. My father served in the Second World War. My parents met in April 1947 at a hospital where my father worked as a cook and my mother was a nurse's aide in Nicosia, Cyprus. In 1953, my parents were part of that huge diaspora that flocked from countries that were part of the British Empire from all over the world and went to Britain, where they were promised and were expecting a better life for themselves and their children. In April 1953, we boarded an Israeli passenger ship called Jerusalem and sailed to Britain. I was 5 years old, and my time in the ancient world was over. Act 2, the Old World, the United Kingdom, 1953 to 1970. Neither of my parents spoke English. My father knew a little from what he had learned from being in the British Army. And of course, I didn't speak English either. However, being 5 years old, I learned it very quickly because my 5-year-old brain soaked it up like a sponge. My desire to belong and to survive was key to how quickly I learned it, because then I would stop being teased. My father was a very good cook, and my mother's exceptional skill with a sewing needle, coupled with their tremendous work ethic, meant that they could establish themselves in those professions and buy a house in London in 1956. After working her way up in the garment trade, my mother became a valued employee at Huntsman of Savile Row, one of the most renowned tailoring establishments in the world. Her skill was so valued that they never wanted her to retire. Post-Second World War Britain was booming. The government was investing in education, in health services, and in social services. It was a good time to be in Britain. I will always be very grateful for my old world education and the advantages I had growing up in London in the 50s and 60s. I had a wonderful education, and I was very involved in many extracurricular activities at school. It was there that my love of theatre was nurtured, and where I found my calling to teach the performing arts. But life in England did have its drawbacks as an immigrant. One of the most important things an immigrant brings to their new country is their name. This name is a declaration. This name identifies what culture and religion they belong to. This name will be difficult to read because not all names are written in the Latin alphabet. This name will be difficult to pronounce. This name will throw up red flags. This name will identify the other. Throughout history, when immigrants move, many change their names as part of needing to belong and to show that they are willing to fit in, even if it means stripping themselves of the one thing that identifies them completely. My family was no different. My birth name was Ilkay Hassan. You're not going to get a more Muslim name than Hassan. When a person sees that name Hassan, they are going to draw all kinds of conclusions of who and what I am. It wouldn't matter where I was born or where I called home. And my family, despite creating a good life in Britain, did experience this kind of racism. In 1965, my father, not a religious man at all, decided to change my surname to a more acceptable one, so that I would not experience the pitfalls of having a name that would put me at a disadvantage in my education, my employment, or what my aspirations were. He decided my surname of Hassan would be changed legally by deed poll. So one day, in 1965, I sat down with a copy of one of Britain's most circulated newspapers, the Daily Telegraph, and looked for a new surname for myself in the obituary column. I found a name that I thought sounded okay with my first name, and a name that both English and Turkish speakers could pronounce. So, on the 20th of January 1965, I became Ilkay Parish. I had that name for 4 years. I became Ilkay Silk when I got married in 1969. My time in the old world ended when in 1970 I set off to Canada. Act 3, The New World, Fredericton, New Brunswick, 1970 to 2022. The day we arrived in Canada, Pierre Trudeau, the Prime Minister at that time, activated the Emergency War Measures Act because of the FLQ crisis in Quebec. We were alarmed to see the military in full combat gear, armed with machine guns, patrolling the airport in Montreal. We were expecting the famous Canadian welcome, arrived in the country that was pretty much locked down. The aircraft that flew us into Fredericton had propellers. That also surprised us. We arrived in Fredericton very late at night, and it was very dark. We were surprised to see how small the terminal was in Fredericton, how quickly our luggage was ready to pick up, and how easy it was to get a cab to drive us into the city. When the cab driver dropped us off on the steps of the Beaverbrook Hotel, now the Crowne Plaza, I stood on the steps and looked across the street and saw the Playhouse. I saw the legislature next to it, and then to my left, I saw the Beaverbrook Art Gallery. It all looked so pretty, bathed in the nighttime streetlights. I turned to my husband and I said, "What a pretty suburb. Tomorrow we'll take the train and go downtown." The next morning was a bit of a shock. I became inconsolably homesick. I miss my friends, my family, and the advantages of living in a huge city. I missed everything. My former husband had come to do a postdoctoral fellowship in chemistry at UMB, and I had no plans and needed to find employment. But unlike most immigrants, I had some advantages. I was British, from the mother country no less, and I spoke English, kinda like the Queen. So within 4 weeks of arriving in Fredericton, I discovered my theatre training skills were needed by the recently created professional touring company, Theatre New Brunswick. It was a moment in time when the immigration planets were all lined up perfectly in the sky. In telling my life story, I have used some words that reflect my experience of finding a promise of home. Here are the words. Welcomed. It can start with a smile and the sharing of a meal. Accepted. Accepting each other's culture. Supported. Finding a job. Purpose. Being given the opportunity to contribute to the community and wanting to make a difference. My roots run deep here because of those words. And for your information, Act 3 is not quite over yet. The curtain has not gone down.
Ilkay Silk has left an indelible mark on New Brunswick's cultural scene. An actor, director, producer, and educator, she was the influential head of drama at St. Thomas University for decades.
Well, it meant a lot to me today because in 1984 I became a citizen of Canada. I immigrated to Canada in 1970, and I was pinned to become a citizen, and there was a whole ceremony that was involved with that. So today to receive this order was very, very meaningful to me in a very profound way. It was sort of, I felt as I had been bookended, pinned as a Canadian and then pinned as somebody who wants to, feels that we do deserve a better country.